My mom gave everything to my stepbrother: the house, the savings account, the investment portfolio, everything my father had worked his entire life to build. Gone. To a man she'd known for 6 years, to his son she'd known for 5. But here's the part she didn't count on. She made a mistake, one single mistake, and I didn't find it until 3 months after the funeral. Sitting on my kitchen floor, at 2 in the morning, with a stack of documents I almost threw away. That mistake changed everything, and I mean everything. Stay with me, because this story is not what you think it is. My name is Natalie. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in Portland, Oregon, green city, rainy winters, the kind of place that feels soft from the outside and complicated once you actually live there. My dad, Michael, was a civil engineer. Quiet man, steady. The kind of father who showed up to everything, every recital, every school play, every Saturday morning pancake breakfast. Not because he was required to, but because he genuinely wanted to be there. He died when I was 19. Heart attack. No warning. One morning he was there, and by evening he was gone. And the world I had known up to that point, the safe, steady, dependable world he had built around me, cracked right down the middle. My mom, Diane, was devastated. We both were. But grief does different things to different people. My dad's grief would have made him go quiet, would have made him pull me close, would have made him cook big Sunday dinners just so the house didn't feel empty. My mom's grief made her reach outward, toward people, toward noise, toward anything that covered the silence. 18 months after my dad died, she met Gerald at a grief support group of all places, and within 2 years, she had remarried. Gerald came with a son, Brandon, 23 years old at the time, loud where I was quiet, charming where I was careful. The kind of person who fills a room fast and makes everyone feel good without you being quite sure how he did it. My mom loved him immediately. And that immediate, effortless love, was the thing I spent the next decade trying to make peace with. If you've ever watched your parent give someone else the version of themselves you always needed, if you've ever been replaced in your own family without anyone saying it out loud, subscribe now. Because this story goes somewhere you won't see coming. The wedding was small, backyard ceremony, 30 people. I was 21. I stood next to my mom at the altar and held her bouquet and smiled for the photographer. And I told myself I was happy for her. I mostly believed it. Gerald was not a bad man. I want to be clear about that. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't manipulative. He was just completely wrong for what I needed at that moment in my life. He was boisterous in a house that had been quiet. He had opinions about everything. He reorganized the kitchen. He hung his golf trophies in the hallway. He called my mom Di, and she laughed in a way I hadn't heard since before my dad died. And I told myself that was good. I told myself I wanted her to be happy. I told myself grief wasn't a competition. But then there was Brandon. Brandon moved in 3 months after the wedding. He was between jobs, he said. Just for a few months, he said. He stayed for 2 years. And in those 2 years, something happened in that house that I didn't have a name for yet. A rebalancing. The house that had been mine and my mother's. The house my father had bought, that still had his toolbox in the garage and his handwriting on the door frame where he'd measured my height every birthday, started feeling like someone else's. Brandon ate breakfast with my mom every morning. He watched TV with her at night. He came with her to her book club dinners. He called her Diane at first, then Di within a year. Then one afternoon, I heard him call her Mom. I was standing in the kitchen doorway. I had driven 2 hours from my apartment in Seattle for a weekend visit, and he was sitting at the table where my father used to sit, calling my mother Mom. She didn't correct him. She smiled, and the rebalancing that had been slow and quiet suddenly felt very loud. I didn't say anything. I went back to Seattle on Sunday. I didn't visit again for 3 months. And I told myself I was just busy. By the time I was 24, the pattern had settled into something undeniable. My mom and I still talked, called weekly, did holidays. The surface was fine, but under the surface, the math had changed. Brandon got a car for his 25th birthday. Not a cheap one. A used Honda, sure, but one my mom paid for outright. She mentioned it casually on the phone. "We got Brandon a car. He's been having such a hard time getting to work." "That's nice," I said. I thought about the car I drove. The one I'd bought myself at 22 with 3 years of saved waitressing money. The one with the check engine light that had been on since 2019. I didn't say anything, because what would I say? "Why didn't you offer to help me with a car?" It would have sounded petty, and maybe it was petty. But the accumulation of these things, the car, the breakfast, the mom, the golf trophies in my dad's hallway, was starting to become a weight I carried. The bigger shift came when Brandon went through a rough patch. He lost his job. He and his girlfriend broke up. He moved back into the house again. My mom went into full caretaker mode. She cooked his favorite meals. She helped him update his resume. She gave him what I later found out was $8,000 over a 4-month period to cover his expenses. I found out about the $8,000 by accident. She mentioned it while telling a story about something else entirely. Casual. The way you mention something you don't think requires explanation. I gave Brandon some money to help him get back on his feet. "How much?" I asked. She told me. $8,000. I was 25 at the time. I had $4,300 in my savings account. I had never asked my mother for money. Not once. Not because I didn't need it sometimes, but because it never felt like something that was available to me. And apparently, it was. It just wasn't for me. I asked her, carefully, why she hadn't offered the same to me when I was struggling after my first layoff. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You're so independent, Natalie. You always figure it out." I held the phone against my ear. "Brandon needs more support right now," she added. I stared at the ceiling. "Yeah," I said. "Okay." And that was the conversation. I didn't push. I didn't argue. I didn't tell her what I actually thought, which was, "You taught me to be independent. And then you used my independence as the reason I deserve less." I just said okay and went back to figuring it out. Stay with me, because what she did next makes the $8,000 look like nothing. Things came to a head the year I turned 27. My mom was diagnosed with early-stage heart disease. Not immediately life-threatening, her doctors said. Manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. But the diagnosis shook her. And when people get shaken, their true priorities surface fast. She started talking about what would happen after. At first, it was vague. "I need to get my affairs in order. I've been thinking about the house. Gerald and I have had some conversations." I didn't push. It felt too soon, too morbid. She was 58 years old and managing the condition well. I didn't want to hover over her like I was waiting for something. But Gerald and Brandon, apparently, had no such hesitation. I found this out from my Aunt Rose, my mom's older sister. She called me one afternoon, her voice careful and measured. "Nat, I need to tell you something. Your mother has been meeting with a financial advisor and a lawyer. Gerald has been going to the meetings with her." "Okay," I said. "That makes sense. He's her husband." "Brandon has been going too." I paused. "To the legal meetings?" "Yes, I thought you should know." I thanked her and hung up. I sat with that for a few days. I told myself there was probably a normal explanation. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself she was my mother. She had loved my father. She had raised me. She would not, could not, make decisions about my father's legacy without talking to me first. I called her. I kept my voice light. "Hey, Mom, Aunt Rose mentioned you've been meeting with lawyers and a financial advisor. I just wanted to check in, be part of whatever conversations are happening." Silence, a beat too long. "It's just routine stuff, honey. Estate planning. Gerald and I are handling it. Right. Should I come down? I want to be involved. Another pause. There's nothing to be involved in yet. I'll talk to you when there's something to talk about. I asked her, directly. Are you planning to include me in the estate the way Dad intended? She said, Your father's wishes are being honored. I didn't know what that meant. I asked her to clarify. She changed the subject, and for the first time in my life, I felt something cold toward my mother. Not anger, something more like fear. The fear that comes when you realize the person you trusted most might be about to do something you can't undo. 3 months later, she told me. She called on a Sunday evening, which was our normal call time, so I picked up expecting nothing. She made small talk for 10 minutes. Weather, a new restaurant she and Gerald had tried, how Brandon had started a new job, and then she said, I want to talk to you about the estate. Okay. Gerald and I have made some decisions. I want you to hear them from me. Okay, Mom. She took a breath. We're leaving the house to Brandon. My stomach dropped. The house. Yes, Dad's house. It's my house too, Natalie. She wasn't wrong, legally, but she knew what that house meant. She knew my father had bought it. She knew I had grown up in it. She knew his handwriting was still on that door frame. And the accounts? I asked. The primary savings account is going to Gerald. The investment account, I waited, is going to Brandon. The investment account. My dad had built that over 30 years. Index funds. Slow, careful, deliberate accumulation. The kind of account that doesn't happen by accident. It happened because my father sat at the kitchen table every month and moved money into it, planning for the future, planning for his family. How much is in that account? I asked. She hesitated. About 400,000. I didn't say anything. Natalie, I'm here. You're so strong. You've built such a good life on your own. Mom, don't. What? Don't tell me I'm strong right now. Don't use that as the reason. Silence. Your father would have wanted me to use good judgment, she said. Dad built that account for us, for his family. I am his family. Brandon is family now too. I had so many things I could have said. I didn't say any of them. Is there anything left for me? I asked. A pause. The jewelry and the photo albums, and we thought maybe 15,000 from the secondary savings. 15,000 against 400,000 against a house, against 30 years of my father's work. $15,000 and some jewelry. I need to go, I said. Natalie, I'll call you later, Mom. I hung up. I sat on my couch. I didn't move for a very long time, and then I cried. Not for the money, for my dad. For the 30 years he had spent carefully, quietly building something. For the version of him that sat at that kitchen table every month and moved money into that account for the people he loved. He had never imagined this. He couldn't have. He trusted her. He loved her. He thought she would protect what he built, and she had decided to give it to someone else's son. I cried until I was empty, and then I got up, and I started thinking, if you've ever been told you'll receive something and had it taken before you could hold it, if you've ever been cut out of your own story, share this, because what comes next is the part that matters. My mom and I didn't speak for 2 months after that call, the longest we'd ever gone. She sent a few texts. I replied with single words, not out of spite, because I didn't trust myself to say more without saying something I couldn't take back. I talked to a therapist. I talked to my best friend, Jess, who listened for 4 hours straight over a bottle of wine and 2 bags of chips. I talked to Aunt Rose, who was furious on my behalf but careful not to insert herself. And I started doing something else. I started researching. Not aggressively, not immediately, just quietly, asking questions. What are the legal rights of a biological child in an estate situation? What counts as undue influence in estate planning? What happens when a spouse changes the allocation of an account that was established before the marriage? I am not a lawyer. I had no legal background whatsoever, but I had time, and I had Google, and I had a growing feeling that something was wrong. Not just morally, legally, because my dad had an estate plan too. He had written a will. When I was 12 years old, I had overheard my parents talking about it. My dad saying, "Everything splits equally between you and Nat." I had been 12 and hadn't cared. Now I was 30 and cared enormously. I reached out to my dad's old attorney, a man named Howard Fisher who had handled their affairs before my dad died. I asked him if he still had records. He was retired, but he remembered my dad. He said, "Your father was a careful man. He kept copies of everything." He told me to check my dad's files. He would have kept a home copy of every document he signed. My dad's files. There was a filing cabinet in the garage of the Portland house. Gray metal, 2 drawers. My dad had organized it with color-coded folders. I had seen it 1,000 times growing up. I didn't know if it was still there. I didn't know if my mom had cleared it out. I hadn't been to that house in 8 months. But I drove down that weekend. My mom was surprised to see me. I told her I just wanted to talk, and I did want to talk, but I also needed to get into that garage. We had a difficult, honest, painful conversation over coffee. She told me she was sorry. She told me she didn't think I'd been treated unfairly. She genuinely believed that. She told me Brandon needed it more. She told me I was capable of building my own wealth. All the same things. But she said them to my face, which was different. And I told her the truth too. I told her what it felt like to have my dad's legacy given away. I told her what it meant to me. I wasn't cruel, but I was honest in a way I had never let myself be before. She cried. I didn't. I had run out of tears for this. Before I left, I asked if I could go to the garage. "To look through Dad's stuff," I said. "Some of his old things. I just want to feel close to him." She said yes, and the filing cabinet was still there. Gray metal, 2 drawers, color-coded folders, exactly as he'd left it. I went through it carefully, and in the second drawer, 3rd folder from the back, red tab, labeled Estate Personal Copy. I found it, my dad's will, signed, notarized, dated 3 years before he died. I stood in that garage with the document in my hands, reading it under the bare light bulb. And there it was. In my father's careful, deliberate, pressed pen handwriting, all assets accumulated during the marriage, including the primary residence and all investment accounts, shall be divided equally between my spouse, Diane, and my daughter, Natalie, upon my death or in the event of my spouse's remarriage or death. Upon my spouse's remarriage, he had put in a remarriage clause. If my mom remarried, the estate, the full estate, the house, and the accounts was supposed to be split between her and me. Right then, not someday, now. The moment she said, "I do" to Gerald, those assets should have been partially transferred to me. That had been 5 years ago. I read it 3 times, standing in my dad's garage, under that bare light bulb. My hands were shaking, not from anger, from something bigger. Because my dad had thought of this. My careful, quiet, thorough dad had sat with his lawyer and thought, what if she meets someone? What if she moves on? I want to make sure Natalie is protected, and my mother, either not knowing or not checking or trusting Gerald's guidance too completely, had drawn up an entirely new estate plan without ever accounting for my father's original will. The mistake wasn't malice. I believe that now. The mistake was that she had assumed my father's old will was irrelevant, that it had expired with his death, that she could start fresh. But that's not how estate law works, and that was the one huge mistake. I called Howard Fisher the next morning. I drove back to Seattle with the document on the passenger seat, not in my bag, on the seat where I could see it. Howard reviewed it. He connected me with an estate attorney named Patricia Owens. She reviewed it too. She called me 4 days later. Natalie, this document has legal standing. The remarriage clause is valid, and based on what you've described about the estate as currently planned, your mother's new will does not account for it. What does that mean? I asked. It means you have a legal claim to a portion of those assets, a significant portion. I sat down. How significant? Based on what you've described, the house value, the investment account, you could be entitled to between $150,000 and $200,000, possibly more, depending on how a court values the assets at the time of your father's death versus now. I didn't speak for a moment. What are my options? You could pursue litigation, or, and this is often the better path, you could present the document to your mother directly and negotiate outside of court. You think she didn't know about the clause? It's possible she forgot. It's possible her attorney didn't request the original will when drawing up the new one. These things happen more often than people realize. It wasn't a scheme. It wasn't a trap. It was an oversight. A significant, consequential, life-changing oversight. I sat with the decision for a week, calling my mother, going to court, doing nothing. All three options had costs. All three options had consequences. I chose the call. I called her on a Sunday evening, our normal call time. I told her I had been in the garage. I told her I had found the will. I told her about the remarriage clause. There was a very long silence. I didn't know, she said. Her voice was different now, smaller. I didn't know that was in there. Gerald hired the attorney for the new estate plan. I signed what he put in front of me. And that sentence, that one sentence, landed differently than anything else she had said to me in years, because I heard it for what it was, not just an explanation, a confession. She had handed Gerald the wheel on the most important financial decision of her life, the decision that affected her dead husband's legacy, the decision that affected her daughter. She had trusted Gerald to handle it, and Gerald had handled it in a way that benefited his son. Mom, I said, I'm so sorry, Natalie. She was crying. I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't mean to. I know. And I did know. That was the complicated part. I knew she hadn't sat down and thought, I'll take from Natalie and give to Brandon. She had been grieving. She had been in love. She had been trusting a new husband with things she didn't want to think about, and in doing so, she had failed me. Not with intention, but the impact was the same. I need you to fix it, I said. I know. Not for the money, for Dad, because he sat down and wrote that clause to protect me, and I need you to honor what he did. She was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she said. Okay. It took 4 months. New attorneys, long conversations. Gerald, unsurprisingly, was not pleased. Brandon was not pleased. There were difficult family dinners. There were phone calls I don't need to describe. But in the end, my mom amended the estate plan. I received my legal share while she was still living, not everything I was owed from the original clause calculation. We negotiated. I didn't want to bankrupt her life with Gerald. I just wanted what my father had intended. I got $160,000, and I got the photo albums. And I got the door frame. My mom had it removed from the house, carefully. A contractor took it out and had it framed, the door frame with my height measurements, my dad's handwriting marking every birthday. She gave it to me at Christmas, standing in the living room of the Portland house, just the two of us. She handed it to me and said, I'm sorry it took me this long to protect you the way he always did. I didn't say anything, I just held it, because some things don't need a response. Some things just need to be felt. I'm 31 now. I live in Seattle. I have a career I built myself, an apartment I furnished slowly over 5 years, a savings account that finally makes me feel safe, and $160,000 that came from my father's careful planning, from his quiet, deliberate love, from a clause he wrote when I was 12 years old to make sure I would be okay. Even after he was gone, even if everything changed, even if my mom found someone new. He thought of all of it, and all I had to do was find the folder. Red tab. Third from the back. I think about that filing cabinet all the time, how close I came to never going into that garage, how close I came to accepting what I was told and walking away, how different things would have been if I hadn't asked questions, if I hadn't made one quiet Saturday drive to Portland. And here's what I want you to take from this. Not the legal lesson, though the legal lesson is real and important. Know what documents exist in your family. Know what your parents' original estate plans say. Know your rights before you need them. But more than that, ask questions, even the uncomfortable ones, especially the uncomfortable ones, because the people who love us aren't always paying attention. They get swept up. They get tired. They trust people they shouldn't trust with things they shouldn't delegate. And sometimes the person who gets hurt is the one who was too respectful to ask. I was too respectful for too long. I was too careful, too afraid of seeming selfish, too committed to being the one who figures it out on her own. My dad didn't build that account for me to figure it out on my own. He built it so I wouldn't have to. And I almost missed that. The second thing I want you to know is this. My mom and I are okay. Not perfect, but okay. She made a serious mistake, not out of cruelty, out of love going in the wrong direction, out of grief and trust and not paying enough attention. And she owned it. That matters. It doesn't erase what happened, but it matters. Some wounds don't close. They just scar over. And scars are different from wounds. Scars mean you survived. I'm Natalie. I'm 31. My dad left me everything. It just took me a while to find it. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to fight for something that was already yours, please share this. Someone you know might be sitting on a filing cabinet they've never opened. Subscribe for more stories like this. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know.